Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Festivals in the New Era. Just give me a moment while I get our panelists on the screen. John, I think you can turn your camera on your own. Great. We're all here. The panel that we did at the American Film Market was so amazing, and we didn't have enough time because there were so many topics we were covering and a lot of knowledge from so many important people, and we've swapped out Chris Gore for Brian Newman. I think that's a fair trade. So
more than fair.
But our audience may not know all of us here, so why don't we just go around and give a brief introduction before we jump into it. We'll start with Brian.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me here, John and Paul. My name is Brian Newman, and I run a company called Subgenre, and I work mainly with brands that are making films and help them with marketing and distribution. I'm also a producer and have a film called The Outside Story that's been playing the festival circuit for the last year, where possible, in virtual cinemas and drive-ins mainly, and happy to join the group.
Thanks, Brian. How about you, John?
So for those of you who didn't already know this, Paul and I put this together. So I'm a co-founder of Filmocracy Fest and excited to be doing this panel here at the festival. This is our inaugural year. And I'm working with Justin on Film Festival Mastery, which is essentially helping filmmakers navigate the festival circuit. As everybody knows, that things are changing and festivals are pivoting, as I'm sure will come up today. And I have a company called iGems.tv, which stands for Internet Guide to Engaging Movies and TV and Series. So I try and help audiences find engaging content online because there's just too much of it. So that's what I'm doing these days.
Great. And how about you, Lela?
My name is Lela Conners, and I am the Executive Director of Film Festival Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that serves film festivals and the people who run them. We have about 250 members, member organizations. And I also run a organization called Mama Film that is, we have a micro cinema here in Wichita, Kansas, and we're one of the satellite screens for the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. And we show independent films in our cinema and do other advocacy work around women in film.
Cool. And finally, Justin.
Hey, I'm Justin Giddings. Guys, thanks for having me. Love all of you. This is like the third panel, too, so I get to see all my friends again. I am an actor turned filmmaker and kind of got tired of waiting for permission to be creative, and that also spawned some entrepreneurial ventures. I work as the Kickstarter guy. I'm the #1 coach for crowdfunding for filmmakers with $6.5 million raised, over 180 clients launched. And as John mentioned, we co-founded Film Festival Mastery, and that's grown really, really quickly. We've been helping a lot of filmmakers this year, and I'm like really excited about next year and excited to be on this panel. So thanks, everyone. Oh, actually, big news. I got greenlit last night. That's all I can say, but it happened.
Wow.
I'll fill you in, John, later.
Congrats. Yes, congrats. Oh,
Amazing.
and by the way, one of Justin's films is in the festival. Just saying.
That is true. Yeah.
I lied. I'm last but not least. So
okay.
My name is Paul Jun. I'm one of the co-founders of Filmocracy, and our mission is to really serve as a mechanism to help people find a lot of great films through a ratings and rewards mechanism. So on Filmocracy proper, you can watch movies, you can attend film festivals, and at the end of the day, we're asking you to rate these films that don't have a lot of ratings available online. I saw Lela. You wanted to say something?
Oh, no, I'm back. My audio just...
Okay, cool. So why don't, if anybody has any questions, you can definitely type it in the chat or the Q&A. We'll get to them at the end of the session. So why don't I kick it off with our first question? So we'll start on a lighter note. Aside from Filmocracy Fest, obviously, what are some innovative things you've seen festivals do to adapt to COVID? Doesn't necessarily have to be virtual.
I'll throw one out there that I thought was really impressive, and I'm sure everybody here has something else to contribute. But when Brian and I were first talking about this idea of a survey and seeing what new festivals, or I should say, what festivals had introduced into their events that had an impact, one of the things that I thought was incredible was, obviously you can't always fly into Sundance or Cannes or Berlin. A lot of people, whether you're industry or just a consumer looking for festival movies to watch, can't always make it to these events. And CPH Docs brought in, I don't know, Brian, was it Shift 72? They were one of the first in the market when this whole thing went haywire, and they did some panel discussions that they allowed people to attend from all over the world. And I don't remember the totals now, but I think there was a Snowden talk that had been seen by more than, I don't know, 75,000 people or something crazy.
Wow.
So I think, I mean, certainly this will be part of the conversation. You know, it's a little tricky when you open up the gates and you let everybody all over the world see panels or see films. There's a whole distribution crossover thing happening. But I was just astounded at that. And that's something that, you know, when you're doing festivals like AFI or some of the other festivals that I've worked at, you're a regional festival at the end of the day, and people can't attend from all over. So I think this digital thing, as frustrating as it is for a lot of people, and everybody's tired of Zoom, it's created opportunities for people that couldn't get there to see and experience and learn.
I agree. It's been a great tool for the audience, but also I've talked to lots of people who are like regular attendees of regional festivals, and they're just like so excited to be able to watch movies from home and are hoping that like that continues, for better or for worse. I'm not sure. Obviously the drive-ins are a big thing. A lot of festivals did hybrids. Some of them were really great, and some of them I think had a bit of a difficult time, because it is a lot of work, especially when you're running in real life festival and a virtual festival at the same time. You really need sort of two separate teams. And most of these orgs are nonprofits, at least the regionals, and they don't have the capacity to hire people. Like the Sidewalk Film Festival, though, did their entire festival at a drive-in. They didn't do any virtual, which I thought was really cool. And another thing I loved that I saw that the New York Film Festival did was when they had their drive-ins, they created their Q&As as podcasts, so that when you left the drive-in, you could listen to the Q&A on your way home, which I thought was a really clever, innovative, mixed media way of presenting a film festival.
Love that.
Yeah, as a filmmaker, the panels have been just out of this world. Usually, you know, you get up at the end of the film, you kind of stand there awkwardly, you know, in front of the screen and answer a couple of questions, and who's got the mic, and you're like touching each other's mic and stuff. And now we have like, you know, 30, 45 minutes where we can get in depth about the film, in depth about filmmaking, and the feedback from these panels from people watching them has been really, really positive. And I've gotten just a lot more audience engagement out of my films than I ever did just being in an audience in front of, you know, a couple hundred people or whatever it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positive stuff coming out of this as well, which Sean and I talk about a lot too.
Yeah, I think all those things have been great. I don't have a lot to add, except something pre-festival that I liked that Doc NYC did, which was they did what they called a road tour, because they had groupings of filmmakers from different regions. And so prior to the film fest, they did little showcases on, you know, here's the film community in Chicago, in DC, in the South, and really kind of used that as a way to draw attention to some of the films before they launched, which I thought was great. It was like a really good thing to do before the festival launched to get attention.
It's also just a great way to partner with those regional organizations.
Yeah.
Give them content that's specific to their community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also to be a little bit more precise, Doc NYC was also partnering with regional theaters, so you could see their films outside of New York City. So it also helped build the audience in those communities in advance as well.
I've seen a couple interesting things that I thought were clever. Like one, I forget the name of the festival, but they would basically take a hotel that was kind of high and had a lot of balconies, and they would basically have a screen set up in front of that whole wall of hotel rooms, and then they would screen a film that way so that everybody could be social distanced in their own hotel
You're
room
watching
go.
on a balcony. I saw
That's cool.
something like that too. There was a festival in Europe. I don't know if Brian or Lela, remember seeing this, but I think it was in IndieWire. But there was literally, they put a giant screen up in front of a building and on a harbor, and boats could pull in and dock,
Yeah.
Oh
That was
yeah,
drop anchor or whatever. It was so cool.
Yeah.
that was early too. I think you sent me that early
That was really.
June, right?
Yeah,
So-
in the online world, the coolest thing I saw wasn't done by a film fest. It was just done by RZA, the musician, where he's been doing these live screenings of cult films like Shaolin Kung Fu films, and he does live commentary. So he does a video within video, and you're getting kind of like Mystery Science Theater done today, which I think more festivals should think of doing, like fun stuff like that, where it can be a little bit more interactive and participatory. Doesn't
We
work
almost
for
did
every-
that. We almost did that here with Izzy.
Do it next.
They were gonna do a Mystery Science Theater thing because they're hilarious, and it's kind of a spoofy movie. But anyway,
Doesn't that work better though with like older movies that you're not like trying to find out what's exactly happening? Because like
Well,
if
I
it's
think
like
it's a secondary
Yeah.
thing. It's almost like an audio commentary. It's like you don't do it necessarily the first time out, but it's an interesting extra.
And most film fests, or maybe all film fests, had a tendency of showing retrospective screenings, so it's a way to do something like that. I think it also doesn't have to be a cult film. Like I could definitely, like I would join one where you show like a Claire Denis film and have Ira Sachs doing director's commentary at the same time or something. But you don't want it for a brand new film that you haven't seen before. You want to experience it like a movie. But I just think, we can experiment with some new things in this environment.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, like if you could toggle off that picture in picture. So if you want to see some classic film and you've got an actor or director there to talk about it, you can toggle on the commentary or toggle it off and watch the film and enjoy the film. I really love the chat. I see this a lot around in like Discord and just other places outside of film festivals where there's this like communal movie watching thing, and then there's this sidebar where people can chat. And I'd love to see more of that happen. I think in film discussion is a really interesting way to get the audience engaged, especially with the filmmakers there.
Yeah.
there is a question in the Q&A that I saw from Melanie asking about what about the energy of a live audience? That's what she really misses. And like when you do a drive-through, you can't really get that because you're all obviously in your own cars. Has anybody seen different ways that people have been able to like somehow get some live energy from the audience?
Well, my personal take on it is that that's almost irreplaceable, and that's the good thing about Film Fest and theaters that we hope we go back to, and we'll keep these good things that we've gained in terms of like, getting more access for audiences that can't make it there, and doing Q&As and panels that don't care about geography and distance. But that is unfortunately one of the things that's hard to rebuild, but that's also why we did film fests in the first place. That said, I wasn't able to attend our drive-ins for my movie that I produced. It's out now, but the director went to several of them. And he said that it was very similar to going to a live screening because you were still at least getting the cars honking and clapping and doing a Q&A afterwards with a real live audience. And so, I think a lot of filmmakers really appreciated those kind of screenings, even though it wasn't feeling the audience in the room. It was a very close second. But you guys might have some other opinions on this.
Well, I'll just throw out there. I think,
back.
yeah, I mean, I think the important thing here is that nobody's trying to suggest that we're going to replace the value of being in a theater with the community watching a movie in a packed house and the response of that movie from the audience. I mean, I don't think anybody's trying to suggest that that's going to be replaceable, but I do think, at least from my position, I'm trying really hard to find the positives, and I'm trying to look at the silver linings and seeing how this new situation that we're in has forced us to think creatively about what we can do to make things better. And I think it's created opportunities that frankly, were kind of ignored for a long time. One of the things, Brian, you and I talked about this, is the idea of revenue shares. There's a small percentage of films that were playing festivals that were getting screening fees and getting revenue shares. And I think one of the things that is easy to implement, in fact, based on the technology and based on the data that we're collecting, it's easier now to do revenue shares. I mean, sure, screening fees, you can pay $250, you pay $500, whatever. But to implement a more just a more structured system around revenue sharing, I think we're going to see more and more of. And I think that obviously that's a welcome thing for filmmakers. And I think some festivals are struggling with that because they feel like, well, you know, we're really supporting filmmakers and providing opportunities to market their films and reach audiences that they wouldn't reach without us. And I get all that because I've been a filmmaker and a festival director, so I can kind of say it from both sides of the table. But I think that, and the idea that we've all discussed around sharing data, has become more and more important. And if a filmmaker is not going to get acquired by HBO or Netflix, they may have to figure out their own marketing strategy, and to some extent having some data about who is watched these movies and what they think of them and what niches are paying attention, and even geo-targeting. I think all that information is going to be more accessible, and I think it's going to be a game changer, quite honestly. So that's a positive to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the reasons why we made Film Festival Mastery was from the filmmaker side as well. There's just a bunch of new stuff going on that people need help navigating. And I think what's going to happen is that film festivals, the good ones are the ones that are going to embrace this metamorphosis, this evolution, this change, and come out when we do get back into the more traditional thing, that we start seeing these hybrids where more of an audience gets served, the filmmakers get served more, but we get back that live energy thing. Because yeah, as a filmmaker, I got 2 films on the festival right now, and I forget sometimes because, and you know, I get the notification that I got into something, and then I get the notification about the screening, and there's not that showing up in the room sort of thing. And at the same time, I'm taking advantage of what the larger audience provides me in terms of obviously building an audience and building, you know, fans, followers, and so forth.
Yeah, I think the general consensus is everybody agrees that some form of hybrid is going to stay around past COVID. But I wonder, like, obviously Lela mentioned that it's almost like having 2 separate things and you have to have 2 separate teams. Like, what features could make having a hybrid event more successful, or how could they be better intertwined so it's not 2 separate isolated things?
Festival does them at different times. So you sort of have your in-person event, and then, you know, a week later or something, you have the best of fest and you do it virtually, so that you're not sort of, you know, taking the efforts and energies away from your team. That could be a way to do it. I think also we're programming from film festivals year round, because
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I mean, basically cinemas, art house cinemas, and, you know, even the bigger ones and film festivals are in the same playing field right now doing virtual cinema. But from my point of view, I think festivals have an advantage because they have the direct relationship with the filmmakers. And so there's more content available. Whereas with like cinemas and art house cinemas, you're showing stuff from distributors only for the most part. So, you know, there's a lot more available to those festivals and maybe some art houses who have those relationships within their community. So in my mind, you know, I think that these regional, smaller festivals, smaller cinemas are not going to have a problem surviving because there's going to be plenty of content for them. And they have these trusted audiences and people in their communities trust them. So I feel like, you know, there definitely, as we all sort of agree, there are a lot of changes on the horizon. The precipice of like a big change. I mean, you're seeing, like, what is a distributor anymore? You know, is it a brand? Is it somebody sending out an email like, watch this film? I just got an email from Threat, watch this film in the Q&A. You know, who becomes the distributor? It's really about finding the people who have the following and the right voices to get your film seen, and then hopefully for the filmmakers, they're monetizing that in some way too.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about in the report I think Paul's going to put it in the chat at some point, but Brian, Lela, and I put together a report getting feedback from festivals and distributors and filmmakers. What are they looking for? What changes do they see on the horizon, and what's working, what's not working? And one of the things that was pretty clear was that it's possible, in fact, for filmmakers to even almost package their movies into a series of festivals where there is some kind of a fee structure, but they're also reaching a certain number of audiences. And if they're geo-blocked, if that's what they ask for, that's an option that festivals can use that won't impact their distribution. But I think this thing is definitely changing, but the feedback was really positive about embracing these changes from the filmmaker's standpoint. I think festivals are gonna have a lot more questions, to be honest.
The distributors are the ones who are really going to be impacted.
Yeah.
Because to a production company and a filmmaker the other day, we started this film festival day program back in the summer, and we invited our member festivals to join in screening a film at the same time. Everybody unique link. You get half the festival, and the filmmaker would split the revenue. And we had very successful one with like 39 festivals participating, and the filmmakers walked away with like $7,000. And it was a 60-minute short doc, like 60-minute doc that would have been really cool to play in like a. But we haven't done one since then. We're planning to do one in January, and we're talking to this filmmaker who's played a few festivals, and their production company who does a lot of docs, and they're really excited about this. They're like, well, we're in conversation with distributors right now, so we don't really know. And I'm like, but you get all this data, you get all the emails from everyone who watches your film all around the country. Yes. You know that your film played amazing in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and San Luis Obispo, California, and Ann Arbor. Like, you get all this data and demographics. Yeah. How can that be? And for me, what I've never understood is why distributors are like word of mouth, don't sort of understand the power of word of mouth. So I think that those are some of the changes that we're going to see, and the sort of be like, oh, okay. And they're going to have to do some shifting in the way that they've always done things.
Yeah, and why can't they use that data too, right? I mean, that's it.
Oh, absolutely.
That to me would be a driving force to say, okay, well, we know this movie works with this audience. Okay, where do I sign? Right? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Well, it should be a no-brainer, but the problem is a lot of distributors, not all, there's definitely exceptions, but there's several that are kind of plug and play. They always do the same thing for every movie, and they don't really tailor it to the audience. And so they're not going to see the value of that the same way, where those that are smart and that are more nimble are going to use that to their advantage, and already are. I think the problem is it's not consistent. For every example that Lela just gave of, a great experience where the festivals and the filmmaker made money and there was data sharing going on. I was mentioning in the green room just before this, we got approached by a festival the other day that is launching a subscription streaming service to their members, where every month you get a new batch of independent films, but they're not giving any money or any data to the filmmakers. And we were like, well, why would we participate in this? Like, you're making money, you're selling our film to other people,
right? And
it's a right that you never had before. Like, SVOD's usually done by distributors, and that would be great if a festival came up with an SVOD solution that did work and was better than the other options we don't have right now. But when it comes with no money and no data, it's not really that attractive. And so I think there needs to be, and the report is the first step in this, but with the Alliance and others working together to get more festivals to collaborate on best practices so that we can explore new models that work for everyone.
Yeah, Chris Gore would always say that each virtual festival, is now acting like their own mini streaming service. And there are some other responsibilities you have when you're going to do that I think are not being factored in all the time. But a question, I'm going to do a slight pivot here, because I'm thinking about all of the theaters that have been struggling through the pandemic, and some are still making it, surviving somehow by selling popcorn and delivering popcorn and things like that. But with some of them going out of business, doesn't it seem like when we get back into physical festivals, there will be fewer theaters to use? Do you think this could be a problem?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the sad truth is that some of the smaller theaters might go away, but I think that there will still be enough theaters to support a live experience again. I think, I mean, I'm not trying to discount the fact that these guys are struggling. We're talking billions of dollars, especially with the major chains, but they'll find a way to battle through it, and at least most of them will, I believe. I think that an equally challenging question is going to be, even if you've got that building and you've got that theater, and even if some film festivals can drive some of their community that trusts these curators to bring content in, I wonder what the capacity is going to be at those theaters on a year-round basis, even when we have a vaccine and everything. I know everybody wants to get out, everybody wants to go back to movies again, but I don't remember who it was. Brian, maybe you remember. I feel like it might have been, oh God, I'm going to blank on his name now. He used to run Noah Cowan. I think he did a great piece in IndieWire where he broke down the different types of audiences there are, and how many people might go back to theaters, how many people might not want to take that risk, how many people will take the risk as long as X, Y, and Z. I mean, it was really interesting. And so, yes, some theaters might go away, and yes, we will go back to theaters at some point. But I think from a business perspective, I mean, these guys are paying leases, and films are coming in, and if they can't sell enough tickets or enough popcorn, right, where they make their money, I think that's the challenge, right? Because it's going to change the dynamic and the formula of that structure.
Well, I think that some of the art house theaters are going to have to just rethink their model, about becoming places of discovery, which they always have been, but they really have to be that more than ever, because, with Warner, it's the Regals and the AMCs who are this, whatever they're doing, HBO Max, people have big now. People can watch Wonder Woman at home. People can watch the entire slate of Warner Brothers movies at home next year, not have to step into a Regal or an AMC. A lot of these art house cinemas aren't showing those films. They're showing the independent films. So again, it's, in my mind, it's about how you sort of engage your community and become that curator of independent films in your community.
Laemmle's doing some really interesting things too. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to that, but and obviously Kino Marquee. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian, but didn't New York do that too, where or was it Doc NYC, where you could go and see a movie, or you could stream a movie, but part of the proceeds would go to one of these theater chains. And there's something really creative going on with that, and you can support whichever theater you want to support. So like when I recommended a movie through iGems that Laemmle programmed, I picked Laemmle to get the proceeds, but other people could pick other chains or other independent theaters. And I think that's an interesting way to go, right? Because to your point, it's about discovery, and these are interesting movies that most people across the country would never know about.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead, Lela.
Look at Sundance and the power of Sundance, and by partnering with independents across the country, offering this content and sort of a way to support your local community and pride of place. And if we have more people like Sundance and Laemmle doing those things, it can go a really long way. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say there's a few of those initiatives out there, and lots of the distributors very quickly realized that theaters are part of their lifeblood, and so they started making programs like you were mentioning, John, where the theater kind of shows a virtual cinema, and the revenue can be shared with that theater. And the better art houses out there, you can kind of break them into the camp that are members of Art House Convergence. Those theaters, are more community based. They've always relied on a mix of ticket sales as well as donations and memberships. And I think a lot of those will survive. They're having a really hard time, that people will come back to them and they'll thrive. And a lot of them also run film festivals in their communities. So the ones that have built their audience are definitely struggling now, and we could use better leadership at the national level to help support them. But, given the shit show that we're in, they're doing the best they can with
Well,
what they've been given.
let me ask a question. I feel like this came up earlier, and I feel like it's a bigger point that we might want to just spend a couple minutes on here, which is we all talked about the idea that in some ways festivals are kind of moving into this distribution space. And one of the things that Lela said that I've been preaching for years, which is festivals should have cinema societies. They should have ongoing programs throughout the year to brand in their communities. And if they have trusted followers and people that are coming to their festival every year, why not give them something throughout the year? Some of them have gotten that, some of them haven't. But I'm wondering if, as part of this distribution piece, I mean, there's going to be an increase in memberships, right? Where these festivals say, if you want to join us, like Brian just said, somebody approached him that had a pretty bad model, but the idea of memberships for that festival, where you could pay a fee, but then I'm wondering, okay, so there's plenty of other articles for a whole other panel about how many subscription fees can I handle? I've got Netflix, I've got HBO, I've got Disney Plus, I've got HBO Max. I cut the cord, right, to save money. Now I'm getting closer to getting back to that number.
Go back to something that Brian said, though, about the distributors. Oh, am I muted?
I can hear
you. Can hear me? Okay.
No, I can now. Sorry.
Okay. Back to something you said, Brian, about the distributors and the virtual cinema. I can name like 2 art house theaters that have had success with that. And one of the big problems that some of them are talking about is when Oscilloscope or Magnolia does a virtual cinema and you're splitting the revenue, they're getting all the email addresses for your customers. And then they are emailing those customers directly saying, hey, we have new stuff coming out. So with festivals, with about what John's saying with the Cinema Society and year-round programming, festivals have a real opportunity to support filmmakers with that marketing data, with all of those email addresses, with demographics, with potentially rev share, in a way that just distributors can't really do.
But let's dig into that for a second, though, because the film that I have out, The Outside Story, we've shown in probably 20 or 30 film fests through coronavirus, and I've got client films that have played in other 40 or 50 film fests, different documentaries that come from different clients. And we've gotten some reports in terms of this many people watched your film, and we've even gotten some checks, but we haven't gotten a single film fest that's given us data that's useful in terms of audience.
Have you asked?
No email addresses.
But have you asked?
Yeah, they won't give it to you usually because and
they don't have this. They don't have the system in place yet. That was something that we learned from the report. A lot of these
they don't have the
festivals
system in place, and they don't have the permissions. So because not every audience member wants them to just give away their email address. So unless the sector comes together and builds a better system that we can all collaborate in, if I'm doing, like John was mentioning, the SVODs having too many of them, if I'm suddenly being asked to join 20 different film festivals membership SVOD program, I'm going to think that's a waste of my time. But if I can join one, and there's some kind of revenue share festivals and the filmmakers, then that might work. And if I get the option to say, I don't want to give my email address to every filmmaker, but I'll give it to the one of the films that I liked, and I can designate and opt in when I get to do that. But I'm not going to sign up for 20 different services to do that. And every festival is to some extent at the moment, and Lela, hopefully you're going to say you're building this for us. But right now they're all building their own new system and creating a nightmare instead of a new revolution.
Yeah.
That's why we have to take what we're learning from this report and put this coalition, and you've already got most of it built, Lela, with at least a lot of members that you already have. But I do think there is something here, and it doesn't have to be necessarily sharing email addresses. I think it's more about the data and the geo-targeting, how many people are watching it. And like Paul's got this whole gamification and the rating and the reviewing. No. There's so much here. It's just somebody's got to unwrap it and then put it back together better.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna assume that we're gonna figure this out with some people at this table.
Well, I think, Lela, you're positioned because of the Alliance, being a membership organization, and you've got enough on your plate, and I'm not trying to give you too much more. But
Can you go fix all of our problems, please? That'd be great.
that's all our problem.
I'm a mom. I can do that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but it's going to have to take a lot more of those kind of alliances, and so that these good ideas can come to fruition, because that is the reality. Is there's going to be a certain number of theaters that aren't going to make it. There's going to be distributors that don't make it, and let's face it, before Corona happened, they weren't that wasn't exactly the best system for a lot of our films anyways. So if we can build something better out of this that uses technology, like you said, we don't need to have email addresses given out. If I'm part of an app, I can get notifications and not have to give you my personal information, all kinds of things that we could do now. But it's not going to work unless these groups come together and advocate for new systems. And the report's one step in that, and the alliance is one step in that. But I think we need to come up with some solutions that we can capitalize better and apply for funds for, so that we can make that better system sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it would be great if all these different parties were able to collaborate, but I think the fact is a lot of us are competing with each other. Like, as we're saying, like, distributors are becoming less important now, and other people are deciding that they can distribute on their own, or they can build their own platform, and everyone's trying to figure out like what this new world is going to look like. And I think the people that do get ahead are going to be the ones that can find ways to work together and collaborate and figure out the best solution for everybody. Because if you're just trying to, pave your own way to the top, I think you'll meet a lot of problems.
I was talking about this the other day with you, Paul. I think maybe even yesterday. Things are kind of blurring together, but I feel like this whole membership economy that we're in now. Excuse me. I think that there needs to be almost a shift back to customer service, and I think that the winners are going to be the membership organizations that think of themselves as customer based, and that can offer these things and really take care of their clients, right? Of their consumers. And you can't be everything to everybody. And I think that what we in the festival community have learned is there are film aficionados that want to see these movies and want to discover talent and want to see films that they can't find, at the majors, or even at, some of the streaming platforms. So I think that it can thrive, but I do think it's going to be the ones, not like the one that approached Brian, the ones that can have a good model, that care about their filmmakers, but that also care about the people that are going to be paying that membership fee. What are you giving?
That's exactly it, John. I mean, if look at the Netflixes and the Hulus and the Amazons, and what are, the algorithm of those, and what suggested viewing for us is suggested by a computer. And if you're looking at, festivals and cinemas, who's programming those? Actual people are programming those. Mm-hmm. So, and I really do think that the people who have the power in this scenario are the people with the followers and who are with the trusted voice. So how to partner with those voices, to present these films is something that we need to be thinking about, like Brian does with brands. I mean, I think you partner with a brand to distribute your film. They have a following.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's you take trusted curation, which is, I think, where everything's headed, right? There's too much crap out there. You need curators to help guide audiences to the content that's worth their time. So you need curators, and you need audiences that trust those curators, and audiences that are fans that want to see this, right? That's like peanut butter and chocolate. You put those things together, right? You win. And all these other ones that are trying to be entrepreneurial and trying to innovate, but they're not thinking enough about the quality curation or about taking care of their audiences, I think they're just going to lose.
Yeah, I'm watching, John and Paul, as you guys know, I have this relationship with Gunpowder and Sky's sci-fi arm, Dust. And I'm seeing them do this model where they start by being really, really connected to this specific niche audience, providing the content that they want, and then turning that revenue into either distribution for larger projects or just straight up production. So it's like moving, I think, in the opposite direction than what most films are, big old budgets and it trickles down to the audience. It's starting with, well, what is the audience like? I mean, literally their feature film production slate is by selecting from the shorts that are doing well. That's their farming system, almost like the old school studio system. So I think we're going to see creative ways where the audience almost is driving the content that is getting curated for them, because they trust that curator and they know that if they show up at this channel, they're going to see a kick-ass sci-fi short, kick-ass sci-fi
And I
content.
think, right, that's why like genre is going to be so good in like in curating specific interests. Like, was it Night Streams? Was that the film festival? Yeah, that where like those 3 or 4 different horror fests came together and curated. Is that they did and curated this program?
Exactly.
What a great partnership and what a great way to increase audiences. And like, it wasn't like a competitive for them. It's a real partnership, and you just have to figure out the ways to look at it that are audience building and not like audience splitting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Night Streams is a really good example, and that was, I think, 4 horror fests coming together, maybe 5, that were normally at different times of the year in different geographic locations, and they decided to do it all at the same time. And I think that could be done with LGBTQ film fests. I think it could be done with most doc film fests. It doesn't necessarily work with the generic, this is our city, we're showing everything fest, but it can definitely work with those niche film fests that have found an audience. But even on the more regional fests that show a little bit of everything, I think they need to take another step, because they are known for their curation. But what you see all the time is they only focus on their curation during their fest, or, maybe during the year they'll say, here's a film we showed and it's on, Netflix now or something. But if I trust that programmer, I'd like to know what they think about other movies that they didn't even program at their fest. Like, I think the festivals need to get their curators more out front. And a lot of times they hide those curators, and they don't want to be, bothered because they're worried people are going to influence their decisions or something. But if I like, Tom Hall at Montclair Film Fest,
I was just thinking about Tom.
Like, I want to see what he thinks about every other movie that's on different services, not just what they played at Montclair. And so I think film fests need to really take advantage of that and push their curators to the fore, and that could become a bigger model going forward.
I think Nightstream is a good example of festivals coming together and becoming greater than the sum of their parts and getting much wider visibility than they would have individually. And I think a lot of festivals will be struggling with this, is like, how do you basically get the word out about your festival more, and how, what are some underrated or unknown festivals that we should take notice of that maybe the average consumer doesn't know about, but just does? Obviously, you guys just name dropped one right now, but I'm sure there's so many out there that people have not heard about and would absolutely love the curation and content that they put together.
Yeah, Montclair, as Brian just said, I was going to bring up, and to answer that question, Tom Hall is a trusted curator, and he's been doing it a long time. I would throw that, not to put pressure on you, Lela, but since you have this organization with a lot of film festivals, and frankly, some of them are smaller than others, maybe you could throw out a few that people may not know about.
Yeah, I just dropped the list of FFA members in the chat a little while ago.
Oh, great.
Let me see if yep, there you go. And just so people know, this list of festivals, we do vet the festivals who join. And so these are all festivals who adhere to our certain code of ethics that we have within the organization. So yeah, just taking a look at that list of festivals.
Great.
Well,
so basically everybody in Film Festival Alliance is underrated, and everybody should go check out all their festivals.
I think a lot of audiences know like the big ones, right? The Sundances and the TIFFs and whatnot. And then local people know their local film festival, but there are a lot of great local quote film festivals or regional film festivals that just other parts of the world don't know about. And I think that's a great place for them to expand and explore, seeing it in the genre space as well. FilmQuest is a festival that's kind of been just sort of on the rise over the last few years. And they have, tiny little venues. They're really, really filmmaker focused. They curate incredible content. And I know the guy who runs it, and he's constantly pushing to expand the audience outside of the Filmmakers and Provo, Utah, because I've been to Provo, and there's not a large local audience in Provo, Utah, and their coffee is not great. I'm sorry, Provo, Utah. I apologize.
Well, the other thing to add to that is that I think back to the point of the regional audiences that trust those curators. And you look at festivals like Atlanta, Cleveland, some of these big regional festivals have been around for a long time. They've got a trusted audience, and it'll be interesting to see how far these folks push outside their regions, right? Because they obviously have trusted curation, and when they move outside, they're going outside their sweet spot of their community. And some people in other states don't really know about that. I bet a lot of people don't know about Woods Hole, you know.
Yeah.
So there's some great festivals that people from other parts of the country don't know anything about. They know about Sundance and AFI and Slam Dance, and so there are a lot. But I think something Justin and I talk a lot about in our course is the idea that you really, sadly, it kind of comes back to what the goals are for that filmmaker, because some filmmakers only want to play festivals where there's an industry presence because they're looking for acquisition or they're looking to network. Some filmmakers want to play where there's big regional audiences and there's credibility if you win an award. So I do think it kind of comes back to goals. It's almost too general to say, what are some of the underrated festivals? I think there's.
But I'd like to just throw a counterpoint. Is, if you really look at it, even with great curators, a lot of the regional film fests kind of show the same films. Like at the end of the day,
they do.
The films that play at Sundance and Slam Dance and some of these Discovery Fests play Atlanta, play Cleveland, play Calgary, play Woodstock, play these different places, and it's the same thing. And what I keep hearing is all these film fests that are really good regional film fests. I'm not against them whatsoever. Like Cleveland's a good example. Cleveland has one of the best programs in the U.S. in terms of what they do. But I don't want people in New York to start discovering Cleveland. I want Cleveland to use an opportunity to build their audience even bigger than the audience they already had in Cleveland. Because what I need as a filmmaker is more help, getting to know the audiences out in the Cleveland area that weren't already part of the Cleveland Film Fest. And so what I want out of a film fest is better help with that region. And that region, that's what they want too. They want to know, can you bring us better films? Can you enlarge your audience? A lot of these film fests, they might have 30, 40, 50,000 people, and each of them are in cities with, 4 or 5 million people in their surrounding suburbs. And, they're not, this is an opportunity for them to grow within their communities instead of thinking we need to, ask every filmmaker if we can not geo-block to the entire U.S. Let's just focus on the counties around you would be nice.
Well, that brings up the other point that we talked about a little bit before, which is this idea of what if you have a film that has already been passed on by Netflix or HBO, and you can get 10 or 15 or 20 festivals to commit to playing their movie in some hybrid model, and offer you a revenue share or a guaranteed fee of a floor of $500 per festival or something, that starts to add up. And so you can stay in those regions and play to those regions. It's just, I think it's all going to come down to what happens when things start to change again in the spring, if they do, and what's going to happen when some of these festivals do go back to having a bigger live presence. What's that going to mean? I don't think anybody knows yet.
Yeah, but I think it's an opportunity now for festivals to think about what does that mean going forward. So, geography and time on the calendar need to be really shuffled around a lot in their thinking. It would be great if Cleveland, just to keep picking on them because I'm friends with all the people who run that film fest.
It's a great festival.
It's a really good film fest, but just keep picking on them. It would be great if Cleveland was thinking now, wow, wait a minute, if we weren't in April or whatever, we might be able to overlap with this other film fest, and then we could both be showing the same film to our audiences and streaming in the Q&A to anyone who wants to see it anywhere, because we're in different geographies, but we're at the same time. And I think a lot of people need to think about, can we collaborate in new ways? And you can take advantage of network effects better if you're more at the same time. So, if all of a sudden I'm a fan of Justin's work, which, broadly speaking is sci-fi fans aren't bound by geography. So if someone hears about it from the Cleveland Fest when they live in Woodstock, they should be able to watch it at the same time. They shouldn't have to wait till 6 months later when Woodstock gets around to programming it.
Right.
You know,
That's
we
the
need
whole
to
point.
rethink all this stuff and how we can do that even with live events going forward.
Well, I just had a quick question, and I know Paul, you might want to jump into some of the Q&A questions as we're getting close to the hour here. But one of the things that I'm curious about to get your feedback on, having run a number of festivals, I know it's always fun to try and find unique angles, right? And try and do something different than all the other regional festivals that may or may not be working, by the way. But you take a festival like Austin, right? That I mean, Barbara, that team has done a great job, and they have a focus, right? They do have a theme. They do have this writing thing that they kind of pay a little bit more attention to than some other festivals. I'm wondering what you guys think of as these festivals try and deal with this pivot. If festivals need to start thinking a little bit more outside the box in terms of what their focus might be beyond just let's find the best films. Like, are there other ways of using digital technology or focusing on other themes, or, I mean, besides the drive-in that I think a lot of people are using? I'm just wondering if you guys think that could be part of the solution to this new model.
Yeah, I think it's a branding and audience targeting question. I think film festivals all these distribution channels are going to do better the more specific and targeted they can get. And I think it's going to be like the new social media marketing paradigm. Like the old school, we have good films, I just don't think it's going to cut it the way that it used to cut it. I think there's going to have to be a unique selling position. What is it about our festival that is special that you can't get going to filmocracy.com even, right? Like the great indie film distributors. What is it that by hooking up to our festival experience, you're going to get that you can't get anywhere else? I think curation we've talked about, but I think there's a whole range of options that I think people can start to explore, and we're seeing them explore.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think it's hard to throw too much on festivals because they're understaffed and underfunded to begin with. So usually that's a hard time to think of new cutting edge things when you're just trying to keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a little bit tangential to that, I guess I would say I just think there's a lot more opportunity for things they can do year round
Mm-hmm.
to help connect audiences with films instead of just during their festival month. And a lot of them have been doing that pre-corona and more starting to do it. But I think the more we can see that and more collaborations year round, like the Festival Alliance Day, Lela, that you run, where everyone's programming the same film at the same time, even if it's not during their film fest, would be really helpful. Because if I trust your film fest, I'm going to trust your curation throughout the year. And I'd just like to see a little bit more of that, even if they don't specialize their film fest. That would be one small step that would be great.
I do want to ask a question that has just been on my mind personally before we go to Q&A. And anybody, please, ask a question in the Q&A while we discuss this one question that's important to me personally, because I think a lot about Film Freeway, and I love Film Freeway. I think they do a valuable service, but ever since Without a Box disappeared and they've become like kind of the go-to platform now for film submissions. Like, is this a good thing? Are we okay with this, that they're so dominant in the market for film festival submissions?
I think we're going to be seeing some other platforms coming very soon.
There's another one called Fest Home, right?
Yeah, there's several out there, a lot that are more specialized in European films that I know a lot of festivals use. But I feel like that, we went from this Without a Box, dominance to now this all of a sudden Film Freeway dominance. And I think I expect that things will change. And I think there are a lot of festivals that have issues with Film Freeway, just about some of the different festivals that they accept. So I do anticipate that we'll be seeing different forms of submission coming.
Yeah, and I'll just say for the record that I've talked to them a few times, bringing them some new ideas, because I do think they could offer more than just the turnkey, submission solution. They have a unique position, right? That they've got thousands and thousands of filmmakers using their platform, and I think they're not giving them enough. And I think they need to reach out to programmers and curators and start offering more information and tools. I've written a few blogs for them, but I don't know how much they push the blogs out. I don't know how much they're providing to these filmmakers on a regular basis besides just, here are the festivals that have their deadlines this week, and it's 575 of them.
Yeah, right.
I think there needs to be, again, similar to curation at film festivals, there needs to be the curation of festivals. And I understand that they're in the business of making money. And if there's 7,000 festivals out there and they can get them all on that platform, and they can take a tiny piece of even the festivals that frankly are wasting filmmakers' time and money, that's a tough place for a business to be. And I know that they haven't had an easy go of it in the last 3 or 4 months. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I hope that there's new options. I think it's crazy that a filmmaker had to build the database, the open source database of every festival by month and type, instead of them building it for us. They did donate to the guy who made it. I don't know if you guys know about I'll try to put a link in the chat while we're talking.
Yeah.
Justin, you have that list, don't you, Justin? Don't you have that list? That massive list?
What do you mean? Oh yeah. Actually,
I bet that's what
I'll
Brian's
find
talking about.
the list, but
yeah,
that had to be by someone else. I do think filmmakers who are on the panel today should also speak to a lot of other filmmakers, because one of the problems with Film Freeway is that everyone's submitting like crazy, and it's a significant revenue stream for some festivals that don't even get many of their films out of that submission pool. So you should really be careful where you're applying to and not overspend as a filmmaker either.
Yeah, I think that's yeah.
John, you were
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, no,
go ahead.
that's I mean, one of our entire modules is kind of built around stop throwing away. We call it the spray and pray method, right? You just submit to everything and hope to God something accepts you. And it's just a huge waste of time, huge waste of money. And Brian, like you were saying, like a lot of times the festivals you're submitting to, this is not how they're pulling their films. And so we talk a lot about, setting up your goals, setting up your overall timeline as a filmmaker and how that plays into it, because everybody kind of thinks Sundance or bust, and it's just not true at all, especially depending on a filmmaker's goals.
Yeah.
I mean, I know festivals that exist that, like, the festival director has a bunch of festivals that they do year round, and their primary business model is to collect those submission fees. Like, that's why they have all these different festivals, so they can collect, and it actually makes like a decent income for them. And they don't spend as much on curating or actually putting on like a fancy event. They just kind of do the
really festivals.
Yeah, the problem is that nobody's called them out.
There's a lot of them that do that, but I think the short answer to this is, if they're members of the Film Fest Alliance, that's probably not their business model,
right?
For the most part, and the more respected film fests don't just do that, but there are a lot of them that do. So, and you can kind of learn who that is by talking to other filmmakers and
that's the key,
and getting to know other filmmakers.
Yeah.
So we don't need to go on that too long, but it's definitely something you got to be aware of.
One of the things we've been talking about, just sort of to like culmination of this whole conversation, is what is the definition of a film festival anymore? Because if they're series or having year-round cinema, what is a festival, and what does that look like, and how do we define them? I mean, there's change on the horizon, and that's something that has to be examined too.
Cool. Let's get to some questions. So Drew Davis is asking, what makes these services, I'm imagining he means Film Freeway, what makes these services good or bad? And there's a couple of different people who are chiming in about it. But in my opinion, I think there's nothing inherently bad about Film Freeway. But I always get a little concerned when there's one like really dominant player, because you could get private equity coming in, they take over Film Freeway, and then suddenly, this is a nightmare scenario for everybody. So that's my main concern, but feel free for anyone else to chime in. I know Film Freeway helps a lot of people, of course.
I'll just
Well,
say,
right now,
well, go
you
ahead,
have
Brian.
No, just go ahead. I was just saying, there's a lot of film festivals. That's the only thing they use, and you have to use it if you want to submit. So, but I think what Lela was pointing out is there are people coming up with other solutions or some more things coming together, and competition's always good. So hopefully we'll see more of that in the future.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, on the Film Freeway front, I think you have to, as a filmmaker, you have to know that there's no doubt using their service is just going to be part of the system right now, but you use it for what it's good for, which is saving you time in doing your submissions. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do research and understand which festivals can help you reach your goals. And it's, you can't just assume because it's in the Film Freeway platform that it's the right festival for you because they have a great summary and they give 10 awards out. You have to know what the festival can do for you and what are they doing about Q&As during COVID? What are they doing about industry outreach? Like whatever it is you're looking for. And I think people take for granted. I had a client last month who heard about us through Film Festival Mastery, and he wanted some custom strategy because he'd spent $1,200 on festival submission fees, but he admitted he had no idea what he was doing, and he hadn't heard back from anybody. And then we just kind of had to peel back the layers and see what he was really trying to do and which festivals he should be applying to. And I think that filmmakers can kind of get, I mean, no offense, I love filmmakers, obviously. We're here to support them, but you have to do the work. You can't just use that as a tool and check all the boxes because there's a bunch of deadlines next week.
Yeah, I don't think you should use Film Freeway as your basis for research. You go do your research, then you take that list to the platform that allows you to quickly and easily find all those things. And yeah, definitely don't submit by due date this week, because you're going to find yourself spending a lot of money on late submission fees that at that point they've already curated most of the thing anyway.
And we're getting close to the end, so I'll just take one more question. We talked a little bit about revenue sharing, festivals sharing revenue with the filmmakers, and Thomas is asking how much revenue share should be shared with filmmakers from festivals?
I'll just jump in, and I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks. I don't think there's a amount that you can set as a golden rule of what they should share. And there's my film that I produced. There's film festivals we've accepted that have had no fee and no revenue share, but we felt like it was an audience we wanted to hit, or we liked the programmer, or we were in competition, or other things that might bring value to your film. So it's not all about the money. But in the survey, the report that Jon and Lela and I ran, we were finding that a lot of people are starting to kind of settle somewhere in between like a 30 and 50% revenue share as what they want and what they're giving. That's definitely not a rule that everyone's doing, but you're starting to see like some coalescing around. If they do a revenue share, it's usually somewhere between 30 and 50% to the filmmaker. And that might be after some fees and stuff. Because if you look into, everyone thinks digital is free. It's not. The streaming fees that these services are charging festivals are significant, actually. But if they're offering a revenue share, which I think most of them should, not everyone, but most should, it's usually in that range.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that the idea that the hospitality thing is changing, right? I mean, part of the game for festivals all along has been, look, if I bring our filmmakers in, I fly them in, I put them in hotels, or I contribute something to this hospitality program, then maybe I'd rather put my money there than into fees. But because we're not necessarily flying filmmakers in and putting them up right now, some festivals have agreed to, I want to say Ashland is doing that now. They're going to contribute some of their hospitality budget to feature filmmakers. But I also think, again, it comes back to doing your research. If you're trying to get some laurels for your poster and you've got a handful of festivals that want your movie that are credible, reputable festivals that can bring value, if they can't pay you a fee, but you still see the value in being there, then you shouldn't put your foot down necessarily. I think it's case by case.
Yeah, I was going to add that, yeah, maybe when we go back to the hybrid world, you know, festivals giving you the opportunity of, we're going to cover your travel here, or you can get like, take the stipend, or we can do like, we'll pay for your air, you know, your hospitality, or we'll give you $250, or we'll do a rev share. And maybe that's like a percentage. Maybe it's like how distributors work, you know, 250 versus 35%. You know, I think there's going to be a lot of ways to negotiate this going forward. And whoever said researching film festivals is the key, I totally agree. And I see Justin's agreeing too, but you're right. It is so the key for success. And making sure you have a festival like strategy built into your budget, and that you have somebody who's specifically looking at festivals that are good for you and you're a good fit for you and your film.
Cool. I'll just add one final question that came in. What can a filmmaker do to get into a festival of their choice, aside from just applying and sending an email?
Justin, you should put Film Festival Mastery in the chat.
Yeah,
box.
I mean, not to shameless plug,
It's too. It's just too. It's
so
yeah.
big. We have
So big.
8 hours of training plus ongoing coaching to kind of answer that question in a big way. The link I'll put in here, though, is a free masterclass that goes through some of the basics in depth for about a half an hour.
I think one of
that's a good place to start.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, you know, it's a whole other panel to answer that question. But I think at the top of the list, something that goes unnoticed too much, I think, is what we call getting on the radar. Because I think that even if festivals don't want to admit it, I think that some of them are so overwhelmed by the number of submissions, and now they're cutting their budgets because of COVID, and they don't have deep staff, so they've got interns looking at movies. They don't have deep programmers, and sometimes it can really help to find that angle to get on the radar, whether it's you making a call, sending an email, I just got invited to this other festival, or I just won this award, some kind of excuse to reach out to that festival and get on the radar, you know, in the middle of the deadline cycle, not wait till right before notifications and not right when you submit it, but somehow to just stay on the radar. Some of you know filmmakers that played other festivals, have them put in a word. I think just getting on the radar, because what happens is some programmers just get inundated with movies and they forget, or they don't see everything. It's too much. So anyway, on the radar is key.
Yeah, and one thing I tell people sometimes to get on the radar is, you know, everyone's always asking, you know, producers and sales agents and people they know in the industry to put in a good word for them, and that can be helpful. But if you know a filmmaker whose film played a film fest and they liked your film, I find that a recommendation from another artist goes a lot further with programmers than from someone in the industry or even a sales agent. Because if they liked a filmmaker's films and that filmmaker likes your film, that's usually a good sign.
Good point.
All right, so we've gone over again, and I just feel like there's an endless number of things we can talk about with this group. Maybe we should have a weekly TV show. Just keep going through it all.
I'm there.
I can talk about Brian's newsletter every week.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? Let's go around and like do shameless plugs, tell people how they can follow us or learn more about whatever we're working on, because this is the crew. Chris Gore's out, Brian is in. This is the new crew. So everybody, let's go through and let everyone know like what places we can find you. Brian, you can go first.
Sure. I'm going to post into the chat my website and newsletter address if anyone wants to join. I just sent it. I don't know if that went to the whole group or not.
Yep.
And I'd be happy to join this team again to talk about these issues anytime.
Indeed.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brian. Let's go with John.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll put iGEM's TV in the chat because I think that's probably the best place to find me. And one of the things that I learned doing some work with a distributor earlier in the year is that there wasn't enough support for filmmakers after their festival run that weren't getting acquired. So we're creating iGEM's Pro, which is for filmmakers trying to figure out what's next, and we'll have a directory where distributors and streaming channels and festivals can find you. And I think that's going to be helpful, and we'll be aggregating articles about all these questions you're having around distribution, where things go. So I'll put igems.tv in the chat and know that there's a pro, and then I'll let Justin talk about the other stuff.
All right, Justin, you want to
Sure.
follow along?
Sure. Yeah. So for me personally, social media / Justin Giddings on most of it. And for crowdfunding, the kickstarterguide.com. But we have filmfestivalmastery.com /masterclass is that free resource. And we just did a Black Friday special where, Brian, what you were talking about, where John and I watch our clients' films and then refer them out if they meet a certain level of production quality, or we just like it or whatever. We refer it out to our network. I'll talk to John. I don't want to put him on the spot, but we might throw that back up for a little bit. So if you go to filmfestivalmastery.com /Black Friday, if that link is live, you're good. And we'll watch your film and tell our friends about it, which is kind of what Brian was
John has just left the room.
And Lela?
I dropped them in there. We're at Film Festival FF Alliance on social, and my other org is at Mama Film One. And yeah, we are excited to be having this conversation, and like it's really cool to be part of this change and this wave, and seeing what we can do to support filmmakers, because without filmmakers, the film festival industry doesn't exist.
Hey, Lela, can I ask a question? Because I'm not sure if everybody understands it, and if I'm wrong, correct me. There's an opportunity for filmmakers, organizations that aren't film festivals to join your group. Is that correct? Or
yes, we have individual memberships where we have some filmmakers who are members. We have some orgs who are members, like IFP. So yeah, there are different ways. In 2021, we'll be dropping a new like ally sort of membership level too, for people to join who don't need the specific benefits of membership. Yeah.
Right. No, I think it's cool because I just don't want everybody to think you're just for film festivals. Like you do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
And of course, I have to plug myself.
Yep.
Yeah, dude.
I'm the founder CEO of Filmocracy. You guys are already on our platform, so there's not really much else I have to say. So Brian was correct. But thank you all again. You know, this is the all-star team of everything film festivals, and you know, we're very glad that everyone who is here could join us. The chat was very lively. There's great questions. So
Yeah, thanks,
you know, maybe we will consider doing this on a more consistent basis. But until then, please check out the festival. Audience awards will go out tonight. So if you haven't caught anything yet, please watch on demand and rate. This is very important. And the festival will end at midnight tonight.
Yeah, and a final plug for the happy hour, 5 to 7,
Yes.
and at 6 o'clock, these amazing brewers from Boomtown in downtown LA are going to come on and do a live tasting. It is so cool.
Sweet.
Perfect. Yes. Can't forget Boomtown. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for all the great questions in the chat too. Peace all.